Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Pilot Lawyer Podcast. Thank you for your attention while this important legal information is reviewed. What you hear should not replace consultation with an attorney and should not be considered advice for your situation. On behalf of the Pilot Lawyer and your entire crew, it's our pleasure to have you aboard.
Welcome, aviators, to the Pilot Lawyer Podcast with us, the Ison Brothers at the Ison Law Firm, where aviation law is all we do, nothing else. You're here for what we do best, navigating the FAA medical certification process for pilots and those who want to become pilots. Around the office, we say if you don't laugh, you cry. And for the next 30 minutes, we hope to bring you the lighter side of what can otherwise be a frustrating process. Some might even say it's dizzying. So whether you're laughing at us or with us, join us, brothers, as we discuss the fascinating world of FAA medical certification. On that point...
That was a beautiful segue.
I know. I just ad-libbed that one word, dizzying, in there, because guess what we're talking about? Vertigo.
I thought it was pronounced Vertigo.
That's a island down in the Bahamas.
Vertigo?
Vertigo Bay. I'm thinking Montego.
Oh my God, he was serious. That's the worst part of it.
I don't know
where I fly.
We went to Montego Bay. Didn't really care for it.
Well.
Sorry for all the listeners in Montego Bay.
Sorry for all the listener.
Anywho.
Hey, we just picked, before I logged on here, realized that we picked up another subscriber on the YouTube.
You know,
we're up to 17.
I thought we were at 11.
We lost some and then we gained some.
Just like your weight.
No, that's mostly gain.
More up than down.
So, all I have to say is as follows. What are we talking about here today?
Well, you wrote another blog.
Beautiful.
Back on December 26th of 2023.
And we're just getting around to having you read it.
We're just finally, I'm going to read it on air. And it was dealing with vertigo. Can you get a medical certificate with the FAA despite having a history of vertigo? Is this Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo with Jimmy Stewart?
Yeah.
Was this before or after the Rear Window?
Well, this came out in...
It does have Jimmy Stewart in it, right?
Yeah.
James to you.
Yeah. Mr.
Stewart. James Stewart. What year did it come out?
You play this any longer, there's going to be some kind of copyright infringement going on.
Fine. Definitely a complaint.
We're giving a plug for it, okay? We're trying to jump some business for old
with Vertigo.
Alfie.
Yeah. He needs
Alfie
our
Hitchcock.
plug to really be successul.
Well, you got a passing resemblance, too. All right,
Profile.
But at this point,
We'll have him on as
everybody's
a special guest during obesity.
Everybody's turned
Week.
everybody's turned off the podcast by this point.
All right. So can you get a medical certificate with Vertigo?
Serious?
Absolutely. Not a problem. But there's some nuances.
Of course.
What's a nuance?
Why?
Well, nuance, like in Alfred Hitchcock, when it turns out that the woman's really a man and she's really been trying to kill you instead of make love to you. This is the twist in Vertigo.
That's like a modern day Hitchcock.
So the Guide for Aviation Medical Examiners provides some guidance as to what happens when it comes to an airman applying for a medical certificate with Vertigo. Now, in this article, a little bit liberal. The one time I'm liberal is when it comes to this article, in that I've identified vertigo more broadly rather than a specific cause for vertigo in theory. But the way the guidelines to the AMEs is set up is, for the most part, and it sort of follows the protocol for BPPV.
Do what now?
That's benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. Right? So the FAA sort of identifies the process for BPPV, vertigo, and I think in my experience, most causes of vertigo, for the most part, will generally follow these protocols. And so
I don't think it's paroxysmal. It's paroxysmal.
I'm pretty sure.
Paroxysmal.
Perioxysmal.
This is
Oh my gosh.
I knew. I made sure I looked through this and make sure. Well, what stupid words are they going to make?
Paroxysmal.
Paroxysmal.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah, but there's no sismal.
XYSMAL. Paroxysmal. Here. Let's ask the Googles.
Turn her up loud.
Paroxysmal.
Boom.
So, BPPV to you, Christopher. Benign paroxysmal positional vertigo to the rest of the world. The FAA identifies 3 categories of the condition. You got those in which there's been vertigo with symptoms resolved and is completely resolved, lasting 1 year or less in total. And 1 year is 365 days, Christopher.
Isn't there a half in there?
Probably.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because then you get the...
Okay, be quiet. So you get, that's category 1. So your symptoms are resolved within less than a year. You didn't go around the sun with vertigo. That didn't get you dizzy, right? Category 2, vertigo which occurred in multiple episodes during which the combined time of sickness was 1 year or more. Okay, so I had vertigo, it went away, came back, and the combined totalness of sickness was 1 year or more. And then 3, you've got your severe, persistent, recurrent, refractory to treatment, or which required surgery at any time. So upwards of category 3, you've got some vertigo going on. So depending on which category of disease your vertigo may fall into will depend on what the FAA requires and the timelines it takes to get your medical certificate. So starting with number 1, you're looking at cases in which vertigo has been resolved and symptoms lasted 1 year or less. In those situations, it's going to be a situation for the AME to determine whether or not your condition has been fully resolved without complications. And if that's correct, if that's the case, your AME is able to issue the medical certificate, assuming that there has been no ongoing symptoms, no current symptoms, that those symptoms did last less than a year, that you're doing well with no medications, and that you have no hearing loss as a result of the vertigo.
Is Amy just going to take your word for that? Or,
come on.
Hey.
You over here coming up with these questions?
They're good questions.
All of a sudden,
they're relevant.
All of a sudden, he's wanting to talk.
Hey.
My word is usually as good as gold, but not in this case, because the AME is going to want to see something from a treating physician.
On a little scrap of paper.
On a little scrap of paper.
Or a big scrap of paper.
To identify these criteria, right? That your history doesn't fall outside of this criteria, because if your history does fall outside of this criteria, the AME has to triage you into a different category of the BPPV vertigo, which in theory could result in a deferral by your AME to the AMCD at the FAA.
So I'm walking out of there with a medical though, right?
If you fall into category 1 and your documentation is in line with category 1, your documentation doesn't say anything else that's stupid, right?
Well,
you provide them a letter saying his vertigo went away, but now that you stopped using the cocaine, you're just fine, right? Now, if that's the case, if your cocaine is causing vertigo, that needs to be in the report, unfortunately. But if that's a typo, you need to get that cleared right away. If it's meant to say his vertigo has gone away since he stopped drinking Coke, that's what it's meant to say, but it says cocaine, you've got a problem. And some
I don't think
unfortunate
you're drinking cocaine, so
well,
it's on its face. It's
on its face,
facially
it's fallacious.
invalid.
So that being said, but people will walk in there. There's something wrong with fallacious.
No, that's
full of fallacy.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
So that being said, vertigo, if you can document this appropriately, your AME should be able to issue a medical certificate. Category 2 of combined sickness of 1 year or more. Again, I had vertigo for 15 days, went away, came back for 200 days. I'm still within a period of 1 year. Had it for 15 days, it came back for 400 days. Now I'm over a year. So the combined sickness is 1 year or more.
And is that based on the current calendar system or the Mayan calendar?
The Mayan calendar. That's right. That's an interesting argument. All right, we should try that sometime. We work off the Chinese New Year, and the lunar calendar doesn't really coincide with.
Where is it written? What calendar we have to are guided by?
That's right. So a disease falling within this category would include a situation, like I said, an airman has been sick with vertigo for a period of time overlapping a year. If you fall into this category, the FAA will require that you provide a current detailed clinical progress note generated from a clinic visit with your treating otolaryngologist or primary care physician. So your ENT physician or primary care physician. In that note, your doctor must identify current use of medication, physical findings of any testing performed, assessment and condition status, medication list, and how you're doing generally. The FAA will also require that you provide testing information relative to any test that may have been performed, such as an ECOG, a VEMP, or an MRI. So in those cases, though, your AME is likely to defer your application.
Likely or must?
Must.
You must.
I must.
So there's no likely about it. It's going to happen.
Well, it's possible that if you get with an AME that is a helpful AME, you provide this detailed clinical progress note in advance of your AME visit, and the AME calls the FAA, the doctor of the day, and says, hey, I'm sitting here in front of Christopher S. Ison, Esquire, and even though the morbid obesity is somewhat concerning, the vertigo that went over a year, I have a favorable detailed clinical progress note.
It's just the obesity weighing me down.
Yeah. Right. So that being said, that's category 2.
Has your FAA medical certificate been denied? Are you concerned you may not be able to get a medical certificate from the FAA? Are you at risk for FAA action for failing to report your medical history appropriately? Call the pilot lawyer at 1-855-FAA-1215 to discuss your options for getting the FAA to issue your medical certificate and get you flying. We are happy to evaluate your case and discuss with you a plan for presenting your case to the AME or the FAA. Aviation law is all we do, nothing else.
Just to make clear, if you don't have all your ducks in a row,
you're going to get deferred.
You're going to get deferred. But if
it's
you do
possible
have
you can get deferred with number 1 if you don't have your ducks in a row.
If you do have your ducks in a row and you have an AME who's willing to work with you, not too busy that they just want to
I get my $100.
Get your $100 and move on to the next guy, and then maybe you could walk out of there with a medical, but that's questionable. That's questionable. Okay.
Number 3, you're definitely getting deferred. Severe vertigo or vertigo requiring surgery. So in this situation, you're definitely getting deferred. The FAA will require a detailed clinical progress note, but the report must be from an ENT. It's no longer going to pass mustard with cut mustard. I thought it was cut muster, but turns out it's cut mustard.
I never understood the phrase cut fish or bait.
Well,
cut bait or fish.
Cut bait or fish.
I never really understood either one of those.
Either you're going to be sitting there, not really doing much. You're cutting the bait, or you're going to go out there and fish and really bring home the bacon.
Yeah, but you're not going to be able to fish unless you cut bait.
Yep. So that being said,
I don't know. None of it makes sense. Some of these phrases are just
stupid.
That's right. So even still, you're going to need a report from an ENT, not your primary care physician. You just can't be your family doctor here on this one anymore.
But if you've had severe vertigo,
persistent vertigo,
that's required surgery,
you probably already have an ENT.
Yeah.
That's right. And the FAA is also going to want records all relative to your surgery if you've had surgery. So that is something to keep in mind. Again, detailed clinical progress note will typically be helpful to the AME. Just make sure you're aware of any collateral damage that may come out of those reports. Make sure they're accurate and truthful.
What do you mean collateral damage?
Yeah, so for example, if your detailed clinical progress note says something that's, hey, he drinks, 15 beers a night, the FAA is going to take issue with that. Now, there may not be anything you can do about that. You got to be truthful. Right. But at the same time, if that's not accurate, be aware of the fact that needs to be addressed because the FAA will follow up on that. So the FAA will also be interested in the etiology of your vertigo for the most part. So discuss this with your physician as to whether including information relative to that etiology or the origin of the vertigo would be helpful to include in your detailed clinical progress note. For example, was it coronary artery disease, side effect to medication, a brain tumor, and so on? Therein, though, remember that etiology may very well be its own aeromedically significant issue.
I suppose going back to your other point, though, being aware of what's in there, in the note, not only should it be accurate, of course, but if there's something that you haven't disclosed that needs to be disclosed, you should probably, I know we probably say this, for those who haven't listened to every single episode that
This is the Amendment Corner.
Welcome to the Amendment Corner, where we discuss why.
That's beautiful.
The practical uses of the amendment.
Well, yeah. What is an amendment?
18B is in Bravo on the 8500-8 or MedExpress specifically asks about vertigo. And it identifies that in your lifetime, have you ever been diagnosed with had or have presently, I'm ad-libbing here, a history of vertigo or dizzy spells. It actually says dizziness or fainting spell. So in that capacity, again, it asks history of dizziness or fainting spell. A history of vertigo, no matter its origins, causing dizziness, would be applicable to question 18B.
You might also get it under 18Q for motion sickness requiring medication, if you've required medication. Would you agree?
Is that motion sickness?
Well, what is vertigo?
Vertigo is a movie by Alfred Hitchcock.
I heard it had a Mr. James Stewart in it.
Would it be under...
You got my name right. That's not very good.
What about neurological? Could it fall under that? It definitely.
That comes back to the etiology.
It's also interesting because James Stewart played Charles Lindbergh.
This is coming full circle.
Oh my
It's coming
gosh.
full circle.
Wow.
And Charles Lindbergh suffered from vertigo.
Oh my gosh.
No way.
I don't know. I'm making that up.
Yeah,
So
that's
it
not
could be
slander.
18X. Other issues, disabilities, or
Right?
surgeries.
I mean, if you've had a surgery, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, especially if you've had
18U,
surgery for your
admission
vertigo.
to hospital.
That's right. So if you didn't put this down, what should you do?
Well, at what stage are we talking?
Let's say-
It's
say-
not a neurological disorder, though.
It could be.
Yeah.
How do I
Is it
not know that
The
my
vestibular-cochlear nerve, which is
Whoa.
a cranial nerve, could be
Whoa.
affected and cause
my
it.
VCN?
This guy's
Your
coming.
VCN.
This guy's coming at me with the big syllable
Oh,
words.
yeah.
Well,
And I didn't
anyhow,
have to look it up.
I think the most
Hey, what
important.
about
Yeah.
eye or vision trouble? You get vertigo.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that could cause the vertigo and the vertigo itself that maybe you've submitted your application. Maybe you're flying along fat, dumb, and happy and realize, oh, I didn't put any of this down. Well, then you'd want to do an amendment. Essentially, the amendment would be where you go to the FAA, tell them that you want to correct your applications, relevant applications to reflect this history. If you need help with that, give us a call at the Ison Law Firm, and we'd be happy to take a look.
That was a nice plug.
You like that?
Nice plug.
Seems a little self-serving.
Yeah, well, hey, call firm and they'll help you too. So, I've been doing this thing where I try to pull something from the news to sort of identify, the relevance to these things, what my vertigo
Oh,
makes
it's like there's relevance to what we do?
Not really.
I had a touch
I
of
had to go
vertigo
look-
while flying my remote control airplane the other day. Crashed and burned.
That's beautiful.
That's just your
Now,
innate
I
ability
pulled this
at work
article.
there.
I
can't
pulled
fly.
this article off of Fox 5. Fox 5, wherever that is.
Foxtrot 5.
And the pictures that I printed came along with a snapshot from the actual news. And they've got the reporter standing live on the scene. You can see the picture.
I like how you print this in color.
Yeah, well, she doesn't look very happy that she got
Charging
this
us a bunch of
article.
money for color
Well, it's
photos.
nothing but the best for the podcast listener. Not ers, plural. So this article identifies a very important, relevant piece when it comes to vertigo. Let me go ahead and walk you through it and give you an idea as to why that is. So the National Transportation Safety Board is giving new insight as to what led to a deadly Santee plane crash. Must be Santee, South Carolina. The incident
You're telling me it's Channel 5, CNT, South Carolina?
it's Channel 5 Santee.
Finally, the truth comes out.
Yeah. The incident happened. Now, this article is from November 15th of 2023. So recent. It says that the incident happened 2 years ago and took the lives of the pilot and a UPS driver. Present day, Fox 5 reached out to Rich Martindale, a former aircraft accident investigator, along with Jim Kidrick, a Navy pilot of 20 years, for the analysis behind the findings. Quote, when you fly in a cloud, you've got three things working against you: your eyes, your ears, and the seat of your pants, said Kidrick. It's something that has left its mark on East County and beyond after the pilot, Dr. Sugata Das, who was a cardiologist in Yuma, crashed into a UPS truck and surrounding homes, which killed not only himself, but the driver known as Steve Kruger. Quote, when you fly in a cloud, you've got three things working against you: your eyes, your ears, and the seat of your pants, Martindale explains. You said that. They both said that. According to this article, they both said the same. Kidrick and Martindale said the same
Well,
thing.
I mean, you've flown with the floggles on and whatnot.
Yeah, but why they quote? I think it's a misquote. According to the investigators, it's not mechanical error with the
It
plane.
doesn't make it any less true just because it's a misquote.
That's right. But anyhow, according to investigators, it was not mechanical error with the plane, but rather signs of spatial disorientation or signs of vertigo, per our experts.
How are they going
another
to know
page.
that?
Quote, vertigo is all inner ear kind of stuff. Doesn't that sound technical? It's difficult. It's about as technical as we are. It's difficult to understand, but there are times where no matter what your body is telling you, the instrument is God, Kitrick went on to explain. So, blah, blah, blah. The article sort of goes on to say that essentially, instrument training, instrument flying can cause vertigo-type symptoms, and if you don't rely on your instruments, you could end up dying, unfortunately, as it was for this physician. But nevertheless, it's sort of that goes along with the idea that the FAA is concerned with relative to vertigo, that it can cause issues while you're flying that could result in a fatal event. And I think that's why the FAA specifically identifies vertigo at question 18B on the medical application.
Well, it doesn't specifically. It just says
Well, it
dizziness.
says dizziness. Yeah, so it captures the
I think
idea.
of all the medical conditions that you could probably try to capture or look at as far as medical certification goes, this one seems to probably make some of the most sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I give you that one.
Now, I would also
Having a massive
add
heart attack mid-flight, sure. I'll give you that one too.
Now, I'll also add, though, that vertigo could be caused by various things. There could be different types of vertigo, and that the standards for same may be different. So, again, consult with your attorney at the Ison Law Firm, or Amy, but mostly the Ison Law Firm, if you have a history of some type of vertigo.
If you know or have reason to know of a history of dizziness or vertigo-like symptoms, should you wait till after you filled out the application and seen your AME to start gathering the records, or should you maybe think about getting all that stuff
Yeah, you should get it together well in advance.
What's the point of doing that, though?
So that you can get that detailed clinical progress note, get all the kinks worked out before you go to the AME.
All right. Well, I not only see the runway in sight, we've already touched down. There's no point in recapping this one.
Beautiful.
With a post-flight debriefing. We'll just say this. You've logged an eventful or uneventful, depending upon your viewpoint of it, 22-ish minutes listening to the...
It might have been Santee, California.
Okay.
That was a painful 22 minutes. It's just getting
Somewhere
worse.
there was a tragic
Yeah.
accident
Rest in
in some place in Santee. Anyway, you've listened to the
California.
pilot.
I've confirmed it's California.
Okay. You listened to the Pilot Lawyer podcast, and even though you're probably dizzy with boredom at this point, we are the Ison Brothers of the Ison Law Firm.
I think this one will get us sued.
Maybe by Alfred Hitchcock, but we'll see.
This is the podcastfactory.com.